Hey, friends, this is Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast. Now, it may not quite be the time of year for sales kickoffs to begin, but plans are underway for many companies already. And with the rapidly changing landscape of social distancing and expectations for travel, team wide events may look a little different in 2021. In this session, Megan and Bryan will talk about their experience at Lessonly planning virtual events to enable their sales team and others. Now, let's get into it.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to take a little bit of your time and talk about tips and tricks to pivot your live sales events online. Uh, we've broken it down into a four-part guide, and we're going to try to get as tactical as possible with the goal of hoping you can walk away with some clear tips that you can use in your next Zoom or WebEx event that you're going to hold with your sales team. A little bit about us. I am Bryan Naas. I head up sales enablement at Lessonly. I've been in the enablement industry for years, over 10 now. And with me is Meganne Brezina. Megan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Bryan. Hi, I'm Meganne Brezina. I am the director of enterprise enablement at Lessonly. Similar to Bryan, I've been in the enablement space for a very long time before it was even called enablement.
That's
And
right.
I'm really excited to share these tactical tips with you today. I have a passion for live events, and it's been a learning curve over the past couple of months to figure out how to shift it, but I'm excited to share with you what we've learned so far.
Excellent. Well, let's jump in. So, like I mentioned, we're going to cover four main things. As we look at these, the four categories that we're really looking at here are how do you take that live agenda that you've been planning out or have planned out in the past and rework it to work it in this new kind of virtual environment. Second, we're going to talk all about your presenters. So those subject matter experts, your sales leaders, maybe your product leaders who are going to come in and be presenting to your teams. How do you make sure that you're enabling them to present the best and to engage your participants? Third, we're going to focus all on that engagement. So how do you leverage the tools that you have and some different strategies to make sure you're getting the most out of that time that you have? And fourth, when all else fails, what's the plan B that you're going to come back to maybe when things are struggling or you're not getting the engagement that you want? So in the interest of time here, we're going to kind of run through this. Megan and I are going to run through this and kind of chat and get as tactical as we can through this. And then at the end, we'll pause and ask for questions so that hopefully you guys will be able to engage and get some of those ideas. Megan, anything to add before we jump in?
No, I think that's it. I'm excited to get going.
Awesome. Let's do it. All right, so part one here. Let's talk all about reworking your agenda. So the first thing I want to talk about is setting clear expectations and instructions. So Megan, I'd love to hear some of the ideas that you have around setting those expectations and instructions with your teams.
Well, I think that starts when you initially send out your meeting invite, right? So in your meeting invite, when you have your agenda, I think it's really fair in this age of COVID and the age of remote working to help people understand exactly how that time will be structured. So they know when they will have a 15-minute break, for example. So they can go get their kids settled down for a nap, or if they can get the dog out. I think setting that expectation is really helpful for people so that they can better plan their day. And I think it's also fair to let them know what the goal of that session is. Is the session going to be a one-way delivery? Is the session going to ask them to prepare something in advance or have a deliverable at the end of it? Anything you can do to prepare your people is even more critical in this time of remote learning.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I know from personal experience, I think one of the things that I hate about long sessions is not really knowing how I can plan my time out. It's hard to engage in Zoom for a long time. And so when you set those expectations up front, you can set your mindset to go, okay, I know I've got to engage for 20 minutes right now, and then I'm going to get a break, or we're going to switch activities and we can do something different.
Exactly.
Next thing I would love to talk about is timing. We know that a live session runs differently, right? We can engage and engage even around a room if we're in a large room or even small breakout rooms. But online is a little different. So Megan, I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you think about time and how you plan that time as a part of your agenda.
Definitely. So I think the golden rule is that you never want a speaker to speak more than 5 minutes without there being some type of engagement. So if you know you've got a 10-minute spiel you've got to get through, I'd break in the middle and toss a poll at them or do something, but keep to that time, because you need to keep wholly to your agenda so people know what they're doing. And I think it's fair too that you want to engage your audience in helping to keep you honest on your time. I've had some experiences where I've been in sessions where the presenter said, I give all of you in the audience permission that if I ramble or I start to lose you, I want someone in the audience to raise their hand and say, banana, and I will stop talking. And I think that that golden rule is really powerful in the Zoom environment. So Bryan, if I throw a banana at you today, don't be alarmed, don't be insulted. And you can throw one at me too if I'm talking too much.
Absolutely. I'll take it as a compliment that you're just thinking about me and everybody else on the line here so we don't go on too long.
There you go.
Yeah, I love that. The other thing I think a lot about is really looking at the goals that you're trying to accomplish during this time and thinking about that online environment like you're talking of only having kind of short bursts and how that might kind of play out, where a live in-person one-day session or a couple of day kickoff might work really well to get people together for 16 straight hours. That may not work, or that's not going to work well when you're talking online. So even thinking about what those goals are and how that might spread out. Maybe you spread it out in bursts over the course of a couple of weeks and really kind of drive through there.
I love that idea. And I think if there's anything that we've all learned over these past few months is that Zoom fatigue is real. It is absolutely real. And you need to protect your sellers as much as you can against it, just knowing that we'll call it an occupational hazard these days.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. The third thing here on the agenda is about blending synchronous and asynchronous activities. I think this is one of the things that I'm super passionate about here, about how you go from the live event like we're doing today, where you've got someone sharing information and people more listening, and also think about how you take some of those activities offline in the environment as you think about maybe spreading something out over a week. So what are your thoughts here, Megan?
Well, this is something that we've done really successfully in the past with our sales kickoffs, is leveraging the idea of pre-work and post-work. And I think that becomes more paramount now. But that's something we really need to elevate, because you're going to have everybody enter into your session on an even playing field because they would have taken an element of pre-work so they know what to expect. And then you can wrap it with a bow on the end of it with the post-work. So having them do something offline, if you will, even though it's a probably online activity, but have them do something offline to prep for that online activity, I think is a really powerful way to set up the success for your session.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of leveraging homework, even leveraging asynchronous group activity, right? We don't always have to be together as a big group. We do it all the time in boot camps or sales kickoffs, where we ask small groups of teams to go work together and then come in the evening and then come back for a presentation or something it may be. Like even leveraging some of those things where they can use Slack and at times maybe even their own Zoom meeting to collaborate back and forth as they're working through that homework.
Definitely. You know, one other thing that I found really helpful in my experience, Bryan, is leveraging something like a mobile app, especially for the higher profile events like a sales kickoff, where maybe got a little more budget to play with.
Yeah, for
leveraging
sure.
that mobile app to get people to participate in gamification, or maybe an activity string where they can comment and talk with each other, I think is another way to help boost your engagement, but also kind of slot in the agenda for something new and different.
Yeah, absolutely. What I love about that is it just kind of gives that central rallying point where when you think about all the different tool options that are available, you can make it all work with your existing Zoom tools or Slack or in Google Docs and things like that. But when you have that online app, if you have that option, you can really create that rallying point that makes it kind of more seamless for the entire presentation or the entire event.
Definitely.
All right. I feel like part one was successful here. Reworking the agenda. I love, like I said, I love the asynchronous and synchronous, how we blend that together. Let's go ahead and jump into part two here. So part two is all about enabling presenters.
Exactly. So in this section, we really want to tackle the ways that we can help our presenters be successful when they're talking. And we need to remember too that the speakers that maybe aren't confident in a live environment are going to be extra unconfident in a virtual environment. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that they feel comfortable with their new environment. Brian, will you advance the slide? Thanks. So when you think about matching that format to the presenter style, Brian, I'd love to get your feedback and your perspective on what this looks like.
Yeah, I think this is really all about thinking who those subject matter experts are, who those presenters are going to be, and really thinking about what's going to match their style the best. So there are a number of options. You could do a town hall style. You could do a fireside chat interview style. You could do a stand and present, stand, probably sit, and present type session. That's true. That's right. There are no rules on Zoom, right? So just really thinking about kind of what is the style that's going to best fit the presenter and best fit the content that they're trying to present, and make sure that you play around with those styles. Just like we would mix styles in a live environment, you can really still do that in a virtual environment, just really matching that style of the presenter.
Definitely. Love it. So providing best practice guides. This is uncharted territory for so many of us. And so I think providing your presenters with a bit of a guardrail and sharing what you have seen works well will help them feel more confident as they're delivering what they need to deliver. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I look at this as an extension of honestly a mistake I've made a couple times in my career of not thinking about my leaders and presenters first, right? So I look at this as, hey, you've got a group of people who are an extension of your enablement team, or extension of that team that is hosting the event, is putting on the event, and we want to make sure that they know how to present in the environment that we're going to present in, and you want to make them as successful as possible so that the content does land, so that we get the engagement that we want. And so I really look at this as an opportunity to do a couple of things. One, really enabling those presenters to understand what the environment is going to look like, what the flow is going to look like, so that there aren't things coming out of left field that may kind of throw them off. You want them to be as comfortable with what's happening as possible, so that they can focus on that content and really delivering that. And I deliver it in a guide, right? So it really lays out, here's what the flow looks like, here's where you're focusing, here's what you're focusing on this topic. It's almost like storyboarding or a run of show as you think about kind of that live presentation.
I love that idea. And I especially think the transition between speakers is sometimes something that, can be a little bumpy in a live event, but it'll be even more exposed in a virtual event. So If you have a vision for how you want that to look for your boot camp, your offsite, your sales kickoff, you need to articulate that to your speakers and presenters so that they understand what the expectation is for when they come on stage and for when they exit the stage.
Absolutely.
The dry run piece. Boy, this is critical, right? Especially when you think about the kickoffs, and the bigger the audience, the more the dry run needs to happen. And especially the Zoom environment, we're all getting more comfortable with it, but it's still something that it requires the dry run piece in order to be the most effective that it can be.
Yeah, I look at this as a direct extension of the second point here around providing best practice guides, right? This is, all right, we've got the guide, we understand how it's going to go. Now let's actually practice it so it goes that way. And it's really about getting through that flow and making those presenters and those individuals as comfortable as possible to know what that flow looks like, so that they are comfortable with the content. And it gives everyone involved in those dry runs one last opportunity or opportunities to make sure the content is landing, right? So sometimes we build content, whether it's a presentation, and sometimes it just doesn't land. So the dry runs really kind of help us make those final tweaks to make sure we're gonna meet our goals.
I love that. And I think on that token too, it is important to recognize that deck design in the virtual environment is that much more important, right? We need to talk about how
Absolutely.
imagery plays a much bigger role. We never want to have a PowerPoint slide that is just words, 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 words that people read, right? And in this era, when people are at home, maybe they can multitask a little bit. You want to make sure that they're captured and engaged with what is being presented. And so I think when you have your deck full of imagery, you're leveraging a slide build, so there's some anticipation. Those kinds of tips and tactics can really help your audience stay engaged as well.
Absolutely. Love it. All right, let's jump to part 3 here. And part 3 is all about engagement. So there are so many different ways that we can engage in person. And luckily, we have a lot of options when we're engaging online as well. Megan, I'd love you to talk a little bit about some of the engagement tools that you've leveraged for live sessions when you're thinking about kind of the virtual environment.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. In fact, this week we ran a session with our Lessonly team where we leveraged Envision for a whiteboarding exercise. And there were about 30 people on the call, and it was awesome because in that we were able to whiteboard and do some design thinking around a particular initiative that we're working on. And it was great to see everybody interact, and you could see live updates of how people were thinking and contributing. And that was a terrific engagement tool. We've used mobile apps in my past to really help drive that immediate real-time feedback, polling, Q&A. Bryan, I know you've used some polling tools in your past.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of polling tools, and your webinar tools, your meeting tools have some built in. Like Zoom has a polling tool built in, which is great for some basic stuff. One of my favorites, I don't know if you've used it in the past, is Poll Everywhere. One of the things I really love about that is it gives you so many different options for engagement. So it's not just the standard answer this question, multiple choice type of thing. You can do things like word cloud. So I love
Oh,
to
that's
start
awesome.
sessions. Yeah, I love starting sessions like introducing a topic with a word cloud and just kind of throwing out kind of the topic and asking my participants to put in what's the first word that comes to mind when you think about this. Maybe it's discovery, right? So what's the first thing that comes to mind? And then it builds it automatically right there. It really kind of builds some excitement. You can really riff off of that as you start looking at kind of what are the most common words that are coming up with that topic.
That's a great way to get people excited.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. This is one of my personal favorites. So using breakouts and breakout rooms in Zoom in particular to really facilitate kind of that social learning. So Megan, I'd love to hear your thoughts here on how to leverage breakouts to get the most out of these sessions.
Sure. I think there are a few golden rules when it comes to running breakout sessions, and clarity is the number one thing we have to think about. So when you're going to build your breakout rooms, if you have the luxury of randomizing your audience, I think that's great. But a good rule of thumb is to always review your attendee list so that if you see an opportunity for some strategy thinking, right? See if you can't assign particular people to a specific room, especially if you're looking for a very bespoke outcome, right? But if you have a really large group, it's okay to do a randomization of it. But before you are having your groups take out of the main stage area, if you will, to go to the breakout, it's really critical that you give them a few things. Number one, clear instructions of what it is that they're supposed to be doing in that room. And number two, what is the expected output? Are they supposed to be coming back with a document? Are they supposed to come back with a PowerPoint deck? What is it? And third, how is that information going to be used? Will they be expected to share with the larger group when they get back? Will you as the presenter be picking two groups maybe to present? Giving people clarity around what that looks like, I think helps the experience because there's transparency and it's very black and white.
You're absolutely right. And just doubling down on that clarity piece is so important because I know we've all been in breakout sessions, but whether they're live or virtual, where you spend the first 10 minutes figuring out, like, what are we supposed to do again? And that's just time you're taking away from the opportunity to really engage in the content and hit the goal of that breakout. So having that there and available to go with those clear instructions is so important. And frankly, I think going back to your point about the mobile app, I think this is where something, if you have the opportunity to leverage a mobile app, becomes so beneficial, because you can already have it there set up, ready to go, and all they have to do is hit that mobile app, find that section. They've got that laid out there for them so that they have it when they get into their breakout rooms.
I love that. And I think too, to your point earlier about polling and the word clouds and everything, I think the holy grail is where you have, like, we've used Socio in the past, where and layer on Socio with Slido or Poll Everywhere, whatever it is. And then you've got that whole experience bundled in one place, and then it's documented going forward as well, and they can access it when they need to.
Absolutely. All right, the third one here, which is the one we're going to do here in just a few minutes, is opportunities for Q&A. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, I know Q&A can be definitely more difficult in a virtual environment. So what are some of the ways that you've helped facilitate Q&A in a virtual environment?
I think it's really dependent on the size of the group, number one. I think that's something that you need to consider. If it's a smaller group, you can certainly welcome them to unmute and you can have a conversation. But if you're presenting to 100, 200, 300, 1,000 people, that unmute is not going to work. So I think you need to determine what the vehicle is for your Q&A and tell people what that is in advance. Are you expecting things in chat, for example, or do you prefer to take it offline? What have you done in your past, Bryan?
Yeah, I think your point about kind of the group size is so important, because you certainly don't want everybody in a 1,000-person session unmuting themselves and trying to talk. And even the chat feature built in, it can get very crowded and noisy if you're using that. So really depends on the size of the group. One of the things we've done in the past is we've set up an email address where participants can email in questions. And so we can leverage email, have somebody monitoring that account, leverage tagging within the email so we can always have those up and ready to go. Even throw those onto a slide that we can present back. So we're making sure we're capturing those with the larger group when you have that larger group that you're working with.
I love that idea. I like the idea about the tagging too, so people can reference it and come back to it.
Yeah, and really in email, you can, it's easy to port those out, copy and paste it into another resource, and you can even create a FAQ that you can put in the mobile app and have there at a later time, or throw it in Slack or whatever the right communication channel is.
Love it.
All right, let's jump to part 4. What happens when nothing is going the way you want it to?
You know, I think everything that we've talked about in the first 3 parts is all about the nirvana of presenting, right? It's like the perfect case scenario, but inevitably, especially when you're an enabler, you're going to have experiences where maybe your crowd isn't engaged, and we've all had that feeling of, uh-oh, now what, right? So our hope with this section is to give you some tactical ideas that you can leverage that, you know, hopefully will save you from a situation like this, right?
Absolutely.
Bryan, icebreakers are one of my favorite things, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on them.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're all used to kind of the icebreaker at the beginning of a session, just to kind of get everyone's mind prepared and start to get that thinking going. But what I like to do is just have extra icebreakers or discussion topics that aren't necessarily a part of the session, kind of at the ready, so that I can, if I'm starting to notice that the group isn't engaging the way I want to, or I'm starting to notice that we're starting to wind down, really jumping in and throwing out, like scrapping kind of what the plan is, and kind of getting the mind restarted with the discussion question or an icebreaker. And I think that's a great way, but always having kind of that plan B of that list of things, so that you don't have to kind of think on the fly, which is really hard, right? So you can just go, okay, I'm noticing this, I'm going to icebreaker 1, and we're just going to pause things and reconvene.
I love that. And I think too, and I'm thinking from like the seller perspective, that it might be kind of fun in your agenda if you put like PS, be prepared to answer the following questions. And you
Oh
can put
yeah,
your icebreaker questions there. And if you use them, great. And if you don't, great. But at least it gets them thinking. And there's almost that element of surprise, like, ooh, what if I'm going to be called on to say this? But that can also help prevent something from not going well too, I think.
totally. Another thing that I've leveraged in the past is in a pre-workshop survey that we'll send out,
Yeah.
asking people for things that are on their mind. And you're always going to find those things that don't really fit within the goals of the content, but that might be a great way to grab those discussion questions and use in the live session.
I love that idea. That's a great idea. Another thing that we can do when it's not going well is to use breaks. We've all been in a
Yeah.
situation where the presenter just goes on too far and should have been bananaed, right? But they weren't.
Absolutely.
So as a presenter, using breaks to your advantage and even blocking out part of your agenda to say, hey crew, guess what? This 30 minutes of our agenda would be a perfect opportunity for a walking meeting. Get out of your house, go walk, do something, but
Yeah.
step away. Building that in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And really, this kind of harkens back to kind of part one, which is really about the agenda. But really, like being really meticulous about how you plan in those times. Again, Zoom fatigue is real. I think we've all figured that out in the past couple of months. And so, really thinking about how you use your breaks in a strategic way, and that may be maybe you pop a break and give an option for, hey, we're going to do a 30-minute yoga, and give people the option to jump into that. Or, all right, this time is specifically dedicated for you to go look at the email that you've been wanting to look at, or maybe have been looking at for the past hour anyway. Or what you said around walking meetings, I love providing that clarity up front to say, hey, the content in this is going to be mostly discussion breaks. This is a perfect time to take this next hour and go out and walk. You can still engage. You've got your headphones in, but you can actually get walking and get some blood flowing to really re-energize.
Exactly. I know I love those walking meetings. Those are my favorite ones of the week, always.
Yeah, me too. It really helps break up my day. I try to do at least one a day and really kind of get the blood flowing, and it helps me get through and get over that Zoom fatigue for sure.
Definitely. Wow. Bryan, we covered so much today.
We did.
We did.
I think I hope everybody got a chance to kind of find one or two tips and tricks that you're going to use. So we've got some time here for Q&A, but Megan and I are also available to be contacted after. So we've got our LinkedIn profiles here and our Twitter profiles. So if you want to hit us after we do the Q&A, if your question doesn't come up or we run out of time, please feel free to reach out to us and connect and share any of your ideas or ask us for clarity on anything. So yeah, what do you think? Should we transition to the Q&A?
Yes, I would love to hear questions that people have. Let's do it.
All right, we'll go ahead and start the Q&A here. So that was a fantastic session there. There were so many good details that you were able to include that I was trying to write down questions myself, and then as I was writing them down, you'd answer them with something that I hadn't even thought of before. So good work on the content there, Megan.
Thank you.
There was a couple things though that people are asking about. So there was a really good comment there about the pre-work and post-work. A lot of times that doesn't completely get finished, but the idea of doing a survey, which is a little bit easier, which can provide extra context. Can you expand on how possibly that could be used at all?
Yeah, of course. I think especially when you think about the bigger events, your boot camps, your sales kickoff, if you're planning far enough in advance, you can have an idea of what content would resonate with your sellers as a result of that survey question. So if you have 10 topics that your managers, your leaders have given to you to say, hey, we think this would be helpful, gut check that with your sellers in advance of the session, because in our virtual world, content that isn't going to resonate is going to encourage them to multitask even more. So you want to get their buy-in at the front end to make sure that they're bought into the content that they're about to consume. So a survey can be used in that way to help that thread pull through those virtual sessions. I think that goes a long way for adoption.
And then there's questions on how to use the mobile app. Obviously, everyone's been to a conference where a mobile app is used, but I think it's kind of new for an internal app or virtual SCO or sales kickoff. Are there some examples you can share there?
Yes, I'd love to. So the last kickoff that I helped to host, we kicked off our mobile app 1 month in advance of the session, and we used gamification every week leading up to the event that was focused on trivia about the company. So it was fun. It was like, what manager has crawled around whatever city, you know, it was in the Guinness Book of World Records or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
And people had to answer those questions. You gamify it, you get them excited about the event. That was very, very popular for us. We held the agenda until about a week before, so there was a bit of an element of surprise there. We did a lot of live Q&A through the polling. Through the mobile app rather. We did polling through the mobile app. People were able to upload documents. They were able to upload pictures and comments, just like you would on any traditional social media platform. But the whole goal there is driving that engagement, and then it's a really fabulous package that they can then take back home after the event. One quick tip with that, we had a whole section on customer success where we had documented all of these customer success stories in a less formal way than what you would see on a website, right? So there were outcomes that our customers had achieved that we had permission to share with other customers, but not in a formalized, documented case study kind of way. And that was a huge hit for the team.
Yeah, that's good. Marketing's always looking for a way to use those, but sometimes they're even more effective in that kind of a setting. You also mentioned earlier different ways of presenting that you may not have thought outside of just having a video on yourself. I know a presenter earlier in the session actually had a whiteboard behind him and whiteboarded as if he was in the room. But the question is, what are some types of styles that you can use for different types of presentations when you don't have the ability to be as dynamic as in person?
Absolutely. So I think still some of the traditional fireside chats, panel discussions can really go a long way. The key is making sure that you have a variety of speakers. And of course, we're all isolated and siloed at our home offices or wherever we are, but you can still bring that element of community when you are diversifying your speaker base. So like in this example, Bryan and I did this session together. He unfortunately couldn't make it here this evening, but we did that session together so that you weren't listening to one person drone on for a half an hour. And that will also go to help the adoption and engagement.
Yeah, the interaction was really good, and the combination of video and slides was also really good. Is there any way that you've used different types of interaction over webcasts now than before, when maybe you just use a survey online post, us gathering together?
I lean on those tools way more than I ever did. So for example, the Envision app is a perfect example. That's something our product team uses all the time, but we'd never considered using it in a sales environment. And it was a hit. It was really, really successful. And even if you don't have access to the Envision, a collaborative document like a Google Doc can achieve the same thing.
Yeah, great. Well, we're running up on time, so I think we'll leave it at that. But thank you so much for presenting. Thanks for all those tips, and maybe they're not as useful right now, but as you start to think, oh, how do I do the sales kickoff or next quarter's or half year round sales training, this will definitely come in use, and we'll send this around to everyone who's registered. Thank you so much, Megan. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Scott. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.